It was 9:07 a.m. when the Slack notification hit, just 3 words, cold and clinical, access revoked, effective immediately. No explanation, no call, no warning. Just like that, 6 years of architecture, uptime, and firefighting gone with a ping. I blinked at the screen, half expecting it to be a mistake. Maybe IT fat-fingered the wrong account. Maybe someone clicked the wrong permission group in IAM. But then the second ping came. This time from Brandon, the new CTO, with a podcast voice and zero understanding of what an AWS root credential even meant. Thanks for everything. We're moving in a different direction. That was it. Not even a period at the end. I stared at the message, hands frozen above my keyboard, heart beating loud enough to hear in my jaw. No access, no respect, just discarded. I wasn't angry, not yet. What I felt was colder, a kind of stillness. The kind that comes right before lightning hits. Before I tell you what happened next, take a second. Where in the world are you watching from? And more importantly, have you ever built something from scratch only to watch someone else take the credit and cut you out? Drop a comment below if that hits home. Your story might help someone else feel seen today. Back in 2017, the office was a shared table in a Denver co-working space that smelled like burnt espresso and ambition. The windows didn't open. The radiator clicked like a metronome. And no one had the slightest idea how to keep the back end from collapsing every time more than 10 users signed in at once. That's when Camille stepped in. She wasn't brought in with fanfare. There were no welcome emails or orientation slides, just a Slack message from the founder at 11:43 p.m. "We're crashing again. Can you take a look?" She didn't ask for access. She already knew what needed fixing. In the first week, she spun up an AWS instance using her personal account because the company card kept getting declined. When they needed DNS, she used her own GoDaddy login. When they asked about CI/CD pipelines, she stayed up until 4 a.m. writing bash scripts from scratch, duct-taped to Jenkins on a hand-me-down server she kept in her living room. There was no budget, no roadmap, no legal coverage. But Camille made it work. She always did. And every time something broke, when someone accidentally dropped the production database or the staging server went sideways during a client demo, she was there. Quietly, reliably. The systems ran because she ran. No one ever asked what account everything lived under. No one cared that she never signed an infrastructure handoff. As long as the product shipped and the dashboard stayed green, Camille was just the one who fixed stuff. Over time, she stopped expecting thanks. She just kept building, line by line, layer by layer, quietly laying the digital foundation of a company no one thought would survive. And all of it lived on her laptop. But nothing stays quiet forever, especially when the cracks start to show. It started with a reorg, just a casual announcement during the Tuesday stand-up, the kind that usually meant someone got promoted or someone got quietly laid off. But this time, it was about realignment. Brandon's word, not hers. Brandon Lowe had been CTO for all of 3 weeks. He introduced himself with a Zoom background that said execution mode on and liked to start meetings by quoting Steve Jobs. Camille tried to keep an open mind. New leadership, new energy, maybe it would be good. Maybe finally someone would look at the uptime charts, the service logs, the actual systems, and realize who had kept it all from collapsing. Instead, he walked into his first architecture review and called her inframodel, too static. "We need someone more dynamic," he said, not even looking up from his tablet. Camille blinked. Dynamic? What did that even mean? She'd built a multi-AZ failover system that recovered in under 90 seconds. She automated scaling policies down to individual microservices. What exactly was missing? Flashing lights? A week later, she found herself reporting to a junior product manager named Ethan. Fresh out of a coding boot camp, still mispronounced Kubernetes. He called her Cam in meetings and told her to simplify the language in her documentation because it made him feel kinda lost. She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice. She just nodded, added him to the Jira board, and kept going. But something inside her shifted. Not anger, not yet, just a kind of distance, like she was slowly stepping away from something she used to believe in. Because if they didn't see her now, after everything, maybe they never would. And then came the meeting that changed everything. The one where the disrespect went from subtle to undeniable. It happened in the middle of a sprint review. Camille had just finished walking the team through the updated deployment flow, a carefully tuned orchestration across 3 cloud zones with automated rollback logic and alert thresholds tuned from years of on-call disasters. She didn't expect applause, but she expected acknowledgement. Maybe a nod? Maybe a "thanks, Camille." Instead, Brandon leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, like he was about to deliver a TED Talk. Yeah, I think this architecture's a little too legacy for where we're heading. The room fell silent. Someone clicked their pen, someone else coughed. Camille sat frozen, blinking once, then again, as if replaying the words in her head would make them mean something else. Legacy. She'd written that code during 14-hour weekends when the API wouldn't stop timing out. She'd mapped every failover path by hand, tested disaster scenarios at 2 a.m. It wasn't legacy, it was the reason the system still worked. "We should probably rebuild this from scratch," Brandon added. "Clean slate, clean mind." He assigned the rewrite to Ethan. Yes, that Ethan, the one who still confused staging with production and thought Terraform was a design tool. Camille watched him nod enthusiastically, eyes wide, like he'd just been handed the keys to a spaceship. She said nothing. She just took a slow breath, minimized the zoom window, and stared at the cluster map blinking quietly in her second monitor, the same map that had stayed green under her watch for over 6 years. That night at 2:14 a.m., she got a ping. Ethan had deployed broken logic to production. One wrong variable name and services across 2 regions went dark for 11 minutes. Camille was the one who caught it, patched it, fixed it. No one said a word. And that was the moment she knew this wasn't just oversight anymore. It was erasure. But Camille wasn't angry, not yet. Camille didn't rage, she didn't scream into pillows or draft long unsent emails. She just went quiet, the kind of quiet that builds slowly. Like smoke in the walls, invisible but growing hotter by the day. She still showed up to every stand-up, still resolved tickets, still answered Slack pings, the same short, clear replies she'd always given. But something in her tone shifted, something in her eyes. She stopped reminding people to renew the SSL certs, stopped flagging misconfigured load balancers, stopped explaining why their staging environment was crashing every Tuesday like clockwork. Let them notice on their own. They didn't. Instead, Brandon kept pushing his innovation roadmap, parading new hires through Zoom meetings like show dogs. Ethan kept asking questions he could have Googled, and every time Camille heard the phrase, "modernize our stack," a small part of her drifted further away. So she started documenting, quietly. She pulled ownership logs, system credentials, infrastructure maps, all the things nobody ever asked for, but she'd been managing alone for years. She encrypted the data, backed it up, and stored it somewhere safe, just in case. Just in case someone decided she was no longer useful, or worse, that she was never critical to begin with. She also reached out to Jules, her former colleague, now working in legal tech down in San Diego. "I'm not planning anything," she told her over a quiet call, "but if I ever go silent, I need someone who knows where the wires are buried." Jules didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. Because she too had once been the one who kept things running while someone else took the credit. And Camille kept typing, kept listening, kept building her quiet exit plan line by line. Because the truth is, no one thanks the firewall until the fire gets in. And the next spark was already on its way. It was supposed to be a routine all hands. One of those end-of-quarter syncs where no one really listens and everyone just pretends to be busy while waiting for Brandon to stop talking. Camille had her mic off, camera off, posture slouched. She'd barely slept the night before, patching yet another rollout gone sideways because someone had forgotten to check the API rate limits. Again. She wasn't planning to say anything. But as Brandon wrapped up his 30-slide deck on velocity metrics and cross-functional synergy, he opened the floor. Any final thoughts before we close? Camille unmuted. Not for drama, not to start a fight, just a simple question. Practiced, flat, almost soft. Any updates on the compensation review timeline? There was a pause, a strange silence, like the air had changed pressure. Brandon squinted at the camera, then shrugged. No raise. Not now, not ever. Not we'll revisit. Not let's take it offline. Just that. Final, flat, like he was brushing lint off his shirt. Camille felt the heat rush to her face, but she didn't flinch, didn't argue. She nodded once quietly, then clicked leave meeting. No Slack message, no follow-up, just gone. In the silence that followed, she stared at the terminal window, still open on her second monitor. Lines of code from a system only she truly understood. She reached for her backup drive, clicked it open. And somewhere deep inside her, something unlocked. Not fury, not revenge, just permission. Permission to stop fixing. Permission to stop carrying the weight for people who never noticed. Because now, finally, they had made it clear she didn't belong. But the question they hadn't asked was, what would happen if she really left? That night, Camille didn't cry. She didn't vent, didn't spiral. She made tea, jasmine, 2 teaspoons, no sugar, steeped exactly 3 minutes. Then she sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and began to type. Not in Slack, not in Jira, in Terminal. The root AWS credentials still pointed to her name, her email, her billing info, just like it had 6 years ago when the founders begged her to get things live ASAP and no one had a working corporate card. They said they'd migrate it later. They never did. She didn't touch anything, didn't delete, didn't disable. She simply documented. Created clean backups of all active services, EC2, Lambda, Route 53, RDS, saved audit logs, rerouted notifications to a secure Proton Mail account, registered a dormant LLC she'd once dreamed of freelancing under, Harper Systems LLC, and updated the billing identity to match. Legally, it was hers now. Not stolen, not hijacked, reclaimed. The infrastructure didn't change. No one would notice. Not yet. But every permission, every endpoint, every buried credential that had lived in her head for years now had a clean home. Offline, encrypted, owned. It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. If they wanted her gone, truly gone, then fine. But they wouldn't get to keep the things they never took the time to understand. She saved the file, labeled it flightplan.md. And as she watched the cursor blink at the bottom of the screen, she realized something. They'd spent years building on top of her work, layer after layer. But without her, they had no idea what the foundation even looked like. And if someone decided to kick out the last support beam, she was now the only one who knew where the cracks were. Camille knew she couldn't do this entirely alone. Not because she needed help, she didn't, but because someone had to understand what was at stake. So she reached out to the one person she still trusted, Jules. They hadn't worked together in years, but back when Camille was firefighting cron jobs at 2 a.m., Jules was the only PM who ever asked, "Do you need a break?" and actually meant it. Now she was in San Diego, doing legal ops for a cybersecurity firm. Sharp, discreet, no patience for corporate nonsense. They met over a private video call. No recordings, no email trail, just 2 black rectangles and a long pause. "Are you okay?" Jules asked. Camille hesitated, then exhaled. "I'm not doing anything drastic," she said. "I just need someone to know where the wires are buried." She shared the encrypted file, walked Jules through the structure, who owned what, which services pointed where, what would happen if certain switches got flipped, a checklist of access points, not sabotage. Not destruction. Contingency. Jules listened in silence, then said almost gently, "Cam, I get it, but promise me something." Camille waited. "Don't burn it all down. Not unless they light the match first." Camille nodded once. "I'm not here to destroy," she said. "I'm just done patching holes they keep pretending don't exist." There was a long beat. Then Jules smiled. "You always were the firewall." Camille closed the call. Her tea had gone cold. But her mind had never felt clearer. Now someone else knew. Someone else had the map. All that was left was to see if the company would realize what they were standing on before it started to crack. It started with a Slack thread. Simple, harmless, almost boring. "Hey, anyone else having trouble accessing the prod dashboard?" Then came a second message from QA. "Staging's throwing 403s. Is this just me?" Then 3 more. Then 10. Then the thread turned into a full-blown firestorm. Camille wasn't in that Slack channel anymore. She'd left it quietly 2 weeks ago. But Jules was watching, and she sent Camille a screenshot, time-stamped and clean. The VP Brandon had responded with one line, "Someone reset the credentials. Get IT on it." The head of IT, bless his confused soul, chimed in 30 seconds later. "We don't have access to the root account. MFA's been changed." Silence. Then, chaos. Because suddenly, no one could access AWS. No one could deploy. No one could even view billing. Every attempt to log in hit a wall, a new MFA prompt tied to a hardware token no one recognized, because that token was sitting in a drawer in Camille's apartment next to an expired security badge and a USB key labeled "In case of fire." Brandon apparently still didn't understand what root access meant. "Just overwrite it," he said. Someone replied carefully, "Sir, you can't override the ignition key to the plane. You either have it or you don't." Meanwhile, Camille brewed another cup of tea, loose leaf. 3 minutes, the usual. She didn't check her messages, didn't smile, didn't gloat. The systems were still up. Nothing was broken. Nothing was down. Not yet. But for the first time, they realized they were flying blind. And the person who used to keep their hands on the controls, she wasn't in the cockpit anymore. And the turbulence was just beginning. The email came at 9:26 a.m. sharp. No subject line in all caps, no red flags, no urgent or critical, just a clean white background, blue serif font, and a tone so polite it almost felt passive-aggressive. "Hi, Camille. Hope you're doing well. We'd like to open a conversation regarding the AWS account ownership and explore a smooth transition path back to company control. Please let us know if you're open to a dialogue. Warm regards, Jennifer." Corporate Counsel Camille read it twice. Then once more. She sipped her tea, now lukewarm. No apology, no acknowledgement of what had led to this moment, just a request to hand the keys back. Nicely. She forwarded the message to Jules with 2 words. "Here it is." Jules replied almost instantly. "Let's respond." Within an hour, they had a draft. Simple, direct, clean. No venom, no fire, just leverage. "Dear Jennifer, thank you for your message. I am open to negotiating access terms for the AWS infrastructure currently under the legal and administrative control of Harper Systems, LLC. Please find attached a proposed service lease agreement. This includes guaranteed system availability, continued infrastructure oversight, and a retroactive compensation adjustment equal to 3 years of denied raises with interest. Clause 4.2, all future personnel decisions affecting platform architects must include legal review effective immediately. Best, Camille Harper." She clicked send. Then leaned back in her chair, hands folded, heartbeat steady. No victory lap, no sense of triumph. Just a quiet hum in her chest, the sound of someone who had been underestimated for too long finally setting the terms. And as the message made its way through the company's legal inbox, Camille looked out the window at the gray morning sky. She didn't want to bring down the system. She just wanted them to feel what it's like when the system no longer runs for you. By the end of the day, one familiar name would disappear from Slack, and this time, it wouldn't be hers. There was no announcement, no carefully worded farewell post, no Zoom party with fake smiles and forced best of lucks, just silence. Then, sometime around noon, Brandon's Slack icon went gray, and stayed that way. By 3 p.m., his name had vanished from the org chart. By 4, the company directory showed role not assigned. By 5, someone in marketing finally asked the question out loud, did Brandon quit? But Camille knew the truth. He hadn't quit. He'd been removed. Quietly. Cleanly. Like a line of bad code finally commented out. No one said it directly, of course, but the signs were there. A late-night board meeting, a rapid-fire round of systems access reassessment, and the sudden resurfacing of a dormant internal doc titled Incident Response Protocol Tier 0. Camille didn't celebrate. She didn't screenshot the Slack logs or forward the resignation timestamp to Jules. She just sat at her desk, logged into her systems, still humming, still stable, and kept typing. A few hours later, an unexpected email landed in her inbox. From the CEO. Not corporate, not templated, just 6 words. I'm sorry. You were the system. Camille stared at it for a long moment. Not because she didn't know what to say, but because maybe for the first time, there was nothing else that needed to be said. Outside, the sun dipped lower behind the buildings. The office buzz had softened. Slack had gone strangely quiet, and somewhere in the background, a new conversation was starting, one not about Brandon or access or chaos, but about what comes next when the people who hold it all together finally take their hands off the wheel. Camille didn't return to the company. There was no dramatic rehire, no hero's welcome, no keynote with applause. And honestly, she preferred it that way. She handed over the system not because they deserved it, but because she was done carrying things that no one else was willing to understand. A new CTO stepped in. Quiet, competent, respectful. Jules took on a formal advisory role to help clean up the legal mess. And the team? They kept the lights on barely, but now with a whole new respect for where those lights came from. As for Camille, she left the city, rented a cabin outside Santa Fe, started writing. Not code this time, but a manuscript. Something between a memoir and a manual. How to build with grace and exit with fire. Most days she didn't check Slack, didn't check in at all, but every once in a while a message would find her. A quiet thank you from an engineer still there, or from someone who finally got promoted after years of being overlooked. She never replied. She just smiled. Because deep down she knew she hadn't just reclaimed access, she had reclaimed herself. Some systems fall apart because they're flawed. Others fall apart because the people holding them up finally let go. So if you're out there still building, still fixing, still staying late when no one sees it, build like it's yours. But don't forget, you have the right to walk away too. Let me ask you something. What would you do if you were in Camille's place? Or better yet, have you ever been there already? Share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear it.